Okay, let's try this again. The Lucerne Valley Municipal Advisory Council special meeting is called to order now at 5:05. Would all stand for the flag salute. And Owen Meyer, a member of the COP, is going to lead us. Gentlemen, remove your hats. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Thank you very much for coming. Okay, at this time we have a new board member, Harriet Brashear. She was appointed on July 24th by the Board of Supervisors, and Mark is going to swear her in. So, you ready?
Anytime.
Come on to the end of the table here. We'll get you set up. Say again? I don't care. She put that on her application. I know what you mean. But.
Is that good, Bob? Yeah. You can project. All right. Repeat it. State your name and repeat after me. You can read along with me. Okay?
I, Harriet Brashear,
You solemnly swear
do solemnly swear that I will support, defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservations of purpose or evasion, and I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
congratulations. Sign it over to this one. The official member now.
While they're doing that, has everyone received a card if they want to ask a question, to write the question down on a card? Has everybody received one? If you want a card to ask for a question, raise your hand. And, hey, fire service, put your hands back up.
This is frameable.
And the fellow in the 10-gallon hat also, I think, had his hand up. Okay, is there any other people that want to ask a question? Okay, thank you. Okay, roll call. Looks like everybody's here. We do have one vacancy still from Johnson Valley. At this time, we'll look to approve tonight's agenda. Looking for a motion to approve that.
I so move.
Okay, Harriet made a motion. The second.
Second. Second motion.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Those abstain? Okay, approval of last month's minutes from the regular meeting June 21st of last month. Looking for a motion to approve those minutes?
I make a motion to accept the meeting.
Okay, motion's been made.
I'll second it.
Okay. Motion been made and seconded. Lorraine
Roger,
Huh?
who seconded?
Lorraine. Okay, so as you can see by tonight's agenda, ladies and gentlemen, we've cut out just about everything. This is a special meeting. It's dedicated to the San Bernardino County Fire Department and their proposal. So at this time, we're going to bring them up here. But before that, here's what we're going to do. He's going to make his presentation and all that, and then the board.
Eat the microphone.
And then the board will be asking, making comments and asking questions, and then they're going to take your cards and go over the questions on those cards. So if you've come up with something in the meantime, go ahead and raise your hand and ask for a card. Okay, so at this time I would like to welcome Chief Mark Hartwig, the Chief of the San Bernardino County Fire Department. Mark, thank you for coming.
Members of the MAC. I've got not too many slides, but I want to make sure that I get all the information out. I'm going to start by just letting you know my goal tonight is simply to make sure you understand what the process is that we're going through. You understand how you can express your support or opposition to the process, and how you can access information about the process. That's really my goal tonight. I'm going to go through some slides. I don't expect you to ask all the questions tonight, and I don't expect us to be able to have anticipated all the concerns or questions you might have. So I'm going to talk to you about how you can get more information on the process and the timeline as we move forward. I've already heard a couple questions here tonight that we'll talk about that I didn't cover in the presentation, so that's a good sign. How did we get here right now? I'm going to present it this way. I had a budget meeting. As the fire chief, I have a budget meeting in June for this year's current year's budget. Our budget runs to July to July. It was clear to me that I was using my reserves, and it has been clear to me over the last 4 years that I've been using my reserves to run the organization. In other words, I've been dipping into my bank account, essentially to run the organization, to do things other than capital improvements or capital replacement. I presented my situation to my fire board. My fire board is the Board of Supervisors. They wear one hat with two bills, or they wear two hats. I'm not sure if they switch hats or they just turn it around. But at the end of the day, the County of San Bernardino is governed by the Board of Supervisors, and my fire board is also the Board of Supervisors. That's what we call a board-governed fire district. And I'm going to talk to you about the organization and how it's made up in just a second. What I did is I came to him and I said, I've got a problem. I'm spending more money than I'm bringing in. I'm proposing to you in this budget year 3 solutions. One is for you to tell me, live within your means. You don't draw from your reserves anymore, and quite frankly, I'll tell you that in future years I can't. But I asked him even this year, if you don't want me to use my reserves to run the organizations, let me know. Run this organization, let me know, and I'll live within my means. I'll have to pull out a map, and we'll sit down with my staff, and we'll go through programs and services, and we'll figure out where we can cut. We all do that. We live that way at home. I said, you can give me more money out of the general fund. I'll talk in a little bit. They're not obligated to give me any money. There's no responsibility of the County of San Bernardino to give me money. I am a taxing authority. As a fire district, I'm expected to live off of my property taxes. I said, you can give me more money out of the general fund, or my third option is to we'd have to cut services. I mean, that's the third option. We cut services, you give me money, we cut services, or we live within our means. And that's really, which would be cutting services. That's really the options. Or you can expand FP5. As a fire district, we have the option, the fire board has the option, the fire chief can recommend to the fire board to expand an existing service zone. That's the FP5 we're talking about. We'll get into it, and I think you'll understand it by the time we're done. We can expand FP5 countywide, and we can generate extra revenue. There are requirements to do that. A health and safety code statute, state law requirements to do that. And they chose, my fire board on a split vote, chose to direct me to go through the process to expand the service zone FP5 countywide in order to generate the revenue I need to run the district. I'm trying to set up why we're here today. What brings me to you today?
Sorry, small technical difficulty. I thought it was connection.
Okay. The County of San Bernardino, in fact, we were just talking here early before the meeting with the MAC board. We were actually created to be the county fire district from 43 separate board-governed districts. We were CSA 29 here. I was hired into CSA 56 over in the Wrightwood Pinion Hills area. And then there were a number of community or county service areas that had fire powers that were governed by the Board of Supervisors as the fire board. We were reformed in 2008 to be one fire district, but we still have 4 service zones. We have the Valley Service Zone, We have the mountain service zone. We have the North Desert, which is where we are. And then if you keep going 247, not too much further this way, you're going to get into the South Desert service zone. Old Woman Springs Road, of course, goes right into Yucca Valley. That's the South Desert service zone. We are also comprised of 10 separate, I told you about FP5. There are 9 other fire protection or paramedic service zones throughout the county, and I'm going to show you a picture of that in just a second. So we have 4 geographic service zones, and then we have these 10 paramedic or fire protection service zones. I hope it becomes a little more clear when I show you a map here in a second. The district itself, and I touched on that, we're a separate legal entity from the County of San Bernardino. The board acts as our fire board, but essentially, again, they're 2 separate roles. The County of San Bernardino separate from the San Bernardino County Fire Protection District. This is the fire district boundary. It's large. We have the pink areas are a part of the district and the service zones, and they're a fire protection or paramedic service zone. And you see all the way out here at the river and Needles, we have Wonder Valley and 29 Palms here. In the North Desert, we have Helendale and the Silver Lakes community. We have El Mirage as part of a fire protection service zone. And then we have some valley areas, San Bernardino, Upland. We have paramedic service zones on the mountain and Crestline and Lake Arrowhead. We have paramedic service zones in the county areas of San Bernardino, Highland, and Yucaipa. But if it's pink or it's gray, it's part of the district. The district is 19,000 square miles. It's 2.4 million people, and the county fire district serves about 1.2 million. About half the population of the county is served by the county fire district. It's a little bit misleading, this big white area here. We also serve that area currently. We serve the communities of Victorville, Hesperia, and Adelanto. Hesperia is in the process right now of getting out of the fire business, and they're annexing into the county fire district. So they said, basically, we don't want to contract with you. We just want to give you our fire powers, transfer a share of our property taxes, and then you provide that service. The city of Adelanto just renewed a 10-year agreement with the county fire district under contract. And the city of Fontana, which is a very large area in the valley served by the county fire department, they actually contract with us, and they just renewed a 20-year agreement with the county fire district. So there are some wide areas that aren't part of the district, but again are served by the county fire district. This is the North Desert Service Zone. The largest service zone that we have out of the 4 is the North Desert. It starts way down here at the Cajon Pass, comes all the way up here to the 40 and 15 split, goes part the way out to the river on the 40, and then it goes all the way up to the state line and through Baker into the state line on I-15. I talked to you before, we do have 2 large service zones currently that we generate revenue from. We have FP5, which is the originator of FP5 service zone, and then we have FP3, which is El Mirage, and they also pay money to the county fire district. Where do we get our money? How are we funded primarily? Primarily through the property taxes and the contract revenue. The contract revenue that I mentioned, and then property taxes. We're a taxing authority. We get ad valorem taxes, and so what that means is your property at some point was assessed, and you were then billed 1% of your value in property taxes. That 1% is split up between a lot of different people. Part of the people that get it, part of the organizations that get it are the fire district. I actually collect a portion of your property taxes to provide service. That is meant to be my funding mechanism. So on top of the contract revenue we have, which is a simple services in exchange for cash in a contract, we also have property taxes. Those property tax rates vary throughout the county. We have property tax areas that generate 0% property taxes, and we survive completely off of the service zone revenue. And then we have areas that generate about 26%, all the way up to about 26% of that property tax dollar. I have a sheet here for you in Lucerne Valley. In Lucerne Valley, we collect 11.5%, which is on the low end. I think we average about 13%. Again, in some communities above 20%, and in some areas 0%. 11.5% of your property tax dollar, your ad valorem taxes, go to the county fire district. That generates about $500,000 and some change. So just a little bit over $500,000 is 11.5%. And then, of course, we have the contract revenue. We also generate revenue, I told you, from those service zones. Those service zones, by the way, the FP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in the different areas, and then the paramedic service zones 1, 2, 3, and 4 in different areas. Those vary as well. We go as low as $9 a year in El Mirage, and we go up as high as $192 a year in the community of Red Mountain. And Red Mountain is, let me go back here, Red Mountain is this service zone right here as you're driving up 395 on your way to Ridgecrest, or if you're heading up to Mammoth in the eastern Sierras. This is Red Mountain, and they pay $192 per year for service from us. We also have an MOU with the county. So I told you we have a contract with these cities. Let me go back a little bit on the contracts, because two of those are going away. As you know, Hesperia is annexing into the district. Fontana renewed their contract, Atalanta renewed their contract, and the city of Victorville did just the opposite of what their city to the south said. They said, we're going to get out of the county fire district and we're going to start our own fire department for various reasons. I think primarily it was to save money, and so they are actually starting their own fire department. But the MOU that we have with the county is essentially a contract, very similar to the contract we have with the cities. They give us money in exchange of an expectation of service in areas throughout the county. What are the benefits of FP5 to the fire district? Well, essentially, it lets me address my structural deficit. I have a current structural deficit, and my next two slides here are going to show you some money, where my revenue and my expenses. But we currently have a structural deficit. If this FP5, the revenue generated here, allows me to almost completely cover the structural deficit that I have within the county fire district. It also establishes a sustainable capital improvement and replacement fund. Today, when I need to replace a roof, or we're doing a room addition over here at the Lucerne Valley Station, when I need to add a roof or replace a roof or an HVAC, a heating or air conditioning system, I don't have a fund to go to. I essentially go to the Board of Supervisors at an annual budget meeting and say, I need extra money. And I should, as a fire district, have a reserve fund for capital improvement and replacement. We also don't have any reserves currently. I told you we're living off of our reserves. I'll show you in the next slide, but over the last roughly 4 years, I've drawn enough out of my reserves to be down to almost zero this year. I started at about $20 million in unrestricted reserves when I started 7 years ago. We worked it up to about $43 million in unrestricted reserves, and over the last 4 years, if we spend every dollar that is programmed into the budget this year, and we'll end up in the black, so I don't expect to spend every dollar. We end up in the black every year. That's not an option for us. Then we'll have about $1 million in each service zone. So we'll be down to about $4 million in unrestricted reserves out of my reserve account this year. It also establishes a consistent tax rate throughout the district. I need to let you know you're not affected currently by a paramedic or fire protection service zone, but those that are, their service zone would be replaced by FP5. So there wouldn't be a stacking of service zones or taxes on top of what I'm asking for. We're just looking to get a consistent tax rate across the district. And I talked about the inconsistencies that we have throughout the district. I can't change that percentage. I told you that I'm getting 11.5%, and I have other districts that are getting over 20%. I can't change that, but what I can do is I can change and try to equalize and maybe more evenly shoulder the tax burden countywide on the fire protection service zones. I think it also allows the board, even though they can't promise that to me outside of a budget hearing, it allows the board to continue that contract with me. I can tell you, I've been there 7 years, and every year I've got an increase in from the general fund, but what they are very clear with me on is that I'm really at the mercy of the general fund. They don't have a responsibility to give me money out of the general fund, but I do have to tell you they have done that. Over the last 7 years, they have increased the money that they have provided to me out of the general fund. That contract I have with the county has increased every year. But they tell me as I ask for more and more, and they give me more and more as costs increase, and they continue to contribute more, they say, Mark, I can't promise that to you every year. In fact, the MOU that I have is a year-to-year MOU. So I ask for it every year, and I don't expect that I'll get it every year because I expect another downturn in the economy at some point. And so I'm painfully aware that I'm at the mercy of the economy as well. Here's some numbers, and I'm going to focus, it looks like a lot of numbers, but I'm going to boil it down for you. And again, we'll go back and answer any questions you have at the end of the presentation. We're on slide 7, I only have 10, so we're almost done here. Remember I told you the contract I have with the county, that MOU I have with the county? That's $17.4 million this year. They spread it through these service zones. I get $7.3 million of that contract, and in fact it's always been that way. Most of the services that they buy from me are in the desert areas because our tax revenue is the lowest here in the desert area. They expect me to provide services in exchange for $7.3 million, but if you add that up throughout the entire district, including my special operations, which includes the hand crews, the dozers, my partnership, the staffing with the partnership with the sheriff, our hazardous materials, our technical rescue programs, anything that isn't a fire engine in a fire station, our EMS program, training and education program for our paramedics. That's all in the special operations. That comes to $17.4 million. That's the MOU I have with them this year. It's a year-to-year MOU, as I mentioned. On top of that, I told you I was digging into my bank account. I'm digging in $11.9 million on top of that to run the organization. Some of those costs might be considered by some to be capital improvement. But when you talk about equipment and when you talk about vehicles, fire engines, and ambulances, that I can't run the organization without those. So some of those, especially the lesser costed equipment, I actually include in my operations because I can't, without a blood pressure cuff or without bandages or drugs on the paramedic units, I can't actually provide the service. The men and women that serve you can't provide that service. I'm digging in this year $11.9 million. I told you that's about $12 million a year roughly over the last 4 years, and I'm just now running out of money. I let the Board of Supervisors know that it isn't going to be a question of whether I don't want to next year, it's going to be a question of whether or not I can. And that's why I'm coming to you early this budget year. When I made the recommendation, and the budget was just approved only now, just about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, they literally, I told them I don't need to wait another year to tell you I'm in trouble next year. And that's really why I'm here with you now. So we're not at the last minute, but we are headed down a path right now to generate revenue in a way that we will have to look at other options if this option isn't successful. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So the $12 million I pulled out of my reserves, the contract with the county, if you just add those two up, that's $29.3 million. As we look at how much money the FP5 fire district wide, and you can see by service zone how much it generates, That's simply a function. If you take this $11.2 million here for the North Desert and you divide that by the $157, I think it's in 27 cents, you'll find out how many parcels it is that I would be assessing here in the North Desert. That's where I get the $11.2 million. But countywide, as we work with the assessor's office, that only generates just shy of $27 million. But if you add these two numbers up right here, we're at 29.3, so that leaves us a deficit of almost $2.5 million. It puts us on a much stronger financial footing as we move forward, but it doesn't take care of my complete problem. I would go back to the Board of Supervisors and ask for that $2.4 million next year as part of my MOU or my contract with the County of San Bernardino. If we don't get this FP5 revenue, for us, it gets back to, do you want me to live within my means? And then we just have to figure out what kind of service cuts we do. It's not an exercise that I've had to do to this time. And quite frankly, I haven't sat down, even been tempted to sit down with my staff and look at communities that I would cut service to. We know that it's right now, just on an average, we budget about for salaries and benefits and equipment, utilities, station costs, living expenses there at the station. When I say that, I mean replacing floors or refrigerators or whatever else that might be. That's about $2.2 million per station. And so if I had to come up with any fraction of that $32 million, and I say a fraction, you might look at it and say, hey, you just added $3 million. Well, I haven't had a budget year yet where my costs haven't gone up at least $3 million in our budget. And so I expect that just in the planned employee MOU increases, my supplies and services, if you just use CPI, I'll probably hit 3% or $3 million in our budget, which is only about 1.5% for our budget. We're down, we just have to make a lot of cuts. And I think that's my point. The point I want to make to you today is that's an exercise I hope I don't have to get to, and it's an exercise we haven't done. We do have some software, though, that we use to try to, as we're trying to analyze where the best placement of resources is when we move up resources, or when we build a station, or if we were talking with another community about partnering, where we might place the station, or which station we might keep and which station we might get rid of. We actually use a software program that I can remove a station off of the map in the computer, and then it will recalculate response times. And so as I just go through, and this is very rudimentary, but if I just go through on my desk in my office and remove a station, obviously the response times increase, and they increase differently depending on where you are. Obviously in the Valley service zone, we have stations that are closer together, a higher population, and so we get up to about a 13-minute response time increase, and that's if we remove the Mentone station, or we might remove the Muscoy station, whatever that might be. Up on the mountaintop, we did the same thing. Depending on what station you remove, it's up to 36 minutes. In the North Desert, it could be up to over an hour. If you remove the Baker station off of I-15, and you know what it would be. If we remove this station out here, we respond from Spring Valley Lake, or we would respond from Hesperia. That's where the next closest unit. If they were out, we'd probably start sending something from Yucca Mesa on the Old Woodman Springs side. But that's, you can just see it would have a negative impact on response time. Where are we in the process? Where are we in the FP5 expansion process? What's required? What is the process? How do you get your voice known on your support or opposition for this FP5 expansion? Well, I told you on June 12th, we met, the Fire Board adopted the resolution to initiate the proceedings to expand FP5. We can expand FP5 pursuant to Health and Safety Code 13800. It's known as Fire District Law. It's 13800, and it's a whole section. That requires us to do two things. It requires us to notify property owners and hold a public hearing. Those are the two things it requires. I did ask, though, however, at that meeting that they chose to adopt the resolution to expand FP5, I did ask a couple of other things. One is that they allow me to go out to the communities. One thing I want to make sure of is, regardless of whether or not I'm required to come out and let you know personally, it's important for me to make sure that you know exactly what I'm doing. That when you hear FP5 expansion, or you hear it around the post office, or somebody comes and tells you, or you get something in the mail, it's important for me to know what that means. That's what this meeting is about. I also asked them to do another thing. I can't imagine that public hearing that's required according to state law. I can't imagine having a single microphone sitting in the middle of the room down in the board chambers or up in one of the high desert government centers or Joshua Tree. I can't imagine just sitting that there and having people talking to the microphone and my fire board be able to gauge opposition or support objectively. Nor could I imagine that meeting lasting anything less than 2 days. And so what I said was, could you adopt a process in which we could measure opposition or support? And so we actually adopted a protest process, and it might look familiar for any of you that have done work with LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission. They're the commission, the countywide commission that's responsible to create districts and modify districts to provide essential services throughout the county. They have a process. When they go through an expansion of a district or a dissolution of a district, they go through a protest process. And what that is, very simply, is if 25% of the landowners protest, file a protest, then it goes to 25% plus one, it goes to a vote of the people in an election. If 50% plus one protest, then it is killed outright, and then it goes back to the board. And so when we come to that public hearing, which is October 16th, real quickly, we're doing the meetings here, community meetings, August and September. You're going to get your notice mailed on September 14th, and the notice is going to look almost exactly like this. It's going to be a white envelope with your APN number, the assessor's parcel number. It's going to have a county fire return address, and everybody who's on title is going to get one of these notices. So it's not going to be one person per household. If you have, a lot of us have two people on title at least, usually the husband and wife or two partners at the house. And some people have 10 people on title. If you have 10 people on title, there's going to be 10 of these notices. These are going to go out September 14th. Then we're going to come to the public hearing where we will reveal, and I say we're hiring a consultant to tabulate the protests and to collect the mail. We want to make sure that this is transparent and as objective as possible, and then my fire board, when they make the decision whether or not to adopt the resolution to expand FP5 county fire district wide, that they have all the information that they have, and it's as transparent as we can possibly make it. And then at that meeting, there is a possible adoption, depending on their analysis and assessment of the protest process of the adoption of FP5 fire district wide. Again, because I can't possibly, although my staff is back here, I think I have to say, because probably half the meeting somebody asked, I don't pay extra for the people back here, but I want to make sure you have your questions answered. This is obviously a very large process for us. We're going to mail out roughly 200,000 parcels in the county fire district. You can figure out that 26.9, you can divide that by 157, and you can figure out how many parcels we're going to reach out and touch with multiple owners or multiple title holders on those parcels. There's been a team here that's kind of put together all the information. I get to read the information, but really they've compiled all the information. A lot of it comes from our budget. A lot of the other information just comes from a lot of hard work. So I don't pay them extra. They worked all day. They're going to come here tonight, and then they're going to go back to work tomorrow morning. But that's who you see around here, and of course they'll be around to make sure that they answer all your questions as well if we can't get to all of them tonight. We have a website, sbcfire.org. It's a very informative website, very well run by the folks in our organization. At the bottom of our website, we actually have a tab down there. It says Service Zone FP5. So if you get to a computer and you jump onto the internet and you plug in sbcfire.org, or you got it on your smartphone or your tablet or iPad or whatever you might carry, and you press this button, you're going to get this screen is going to pop up, and it's going to give you every bit of information I've given you tonight and much more. We're going to have the resolution that the board passed. We're going to have some frequently asked questions. We're also going to have an email address. If there's something that isn't there that you're still thinking about, there's an email address. You just literally click the address, and your question will go to a mailbox that's being monitored every day by our department, and we'll make sure we get back to you with the question and answer you might have. One of the questions that's come up, and maybe I'll start with that question because we don't address it here in the presentation, but we address it on some of the information we've handed out and on our website, is if I own multiple properties, do I pay $157 times the multiple properties that I own? The short answer is yes. The longer answer is unless. You go to the tax assessor and you pay a one-time $108 fee, which combines those properties for tax purposes only. It won't have anything to do with splitting the property, a land use process. It is a one-time fee, and then you'll be taxed on that property as if it was one property. The condition on that from the assessor's office, and that is an assessor's process, but we have a link to it. The condition is that they have to be contiguous. That's the only condition that the assessor's office has. Yes, sir?
I'm confused on an issue there when you're talking about that $108 fee there. Is that 108 for the total to combine it, or you're going to nail me at 5 parcels at 108 each? So I get it right.
Well, so what I don't know is that it's an assessor's process. They use it for the LAFCO processes and parcels for that. I don't think it is, but I hate to even say that without knowing it. My understanding is it's a one-time, one fee that and they have to, yes ma'am, they have to be contiguous, meaning they have to be next to each other. If they're not touching each other, then...
No equipment.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, let me just qualify if I could. So we're doing community meetings. Some of them are part of real meetings or regular meetings, and some of them are just us getting out and getting a room and making sure we talk to the communities. I think we have about 20, a total of about 23 of these, and I think we're on number 10. So that is the end of my presentation, sir. I'm certainly open and here and available to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. The MAC board is going to be making comments and asking questions, and then the fire department will take your cards if they haven't collected them yet. They will answer the questions off those cards. Correct?
Yes, sir.
How you want to do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you guys all got that? So if you got any questions, make sure you get it on a card and get it in, and they'll be collecting them here shortly. Okay, I'd like to start on your $29 million deficit. It wasn't that many years ago that Lucerne Valley had its own fire district. We were part of CSA 29. We had a chief, we had paramedics, we had ambulance, we had complete fire service. Mutual agreement aids with everybody like the state law and everything, so we never had a problem. Why is it now, here we are a few years later, and the county fire is $29 million upside down, when it wasn't upside down, when there was all these special little districts all around the county? What happened?
Well, I can tell you this, we've always been upside down because as long as I've been with the district since 1992, and when I joined, I was part of the Wrightwood Fire District, CSA 56. Not long after I joined, we became the fire agency, which meant we were still separate districts, but we shared some services overhead. As long as I've been part of the county fire district, the county has received some money. The fire district, the group of fire districts have received some money from the county. I know that because it was about $8.5 million at that time. I don't know how that was distributed, but that was in 1992. So if you take 1992, and in fact we were only a bit more than that, maybe $10 million when I started 7 years ago. So we've gone from $7 million up to 17.4, about $10 million increase from the county since that time. So I would say it's a combination of a few things. One is the cost of service, the availability of volunteers or paid call firefighters has been one. I would say the staffing that we've guaranteed to the communities that we serve. I would say those are probably three of the biggest ones, but we have seen those costs increase. We have seen a reduction in the number of, and I know here probably not much different than when I was hired as a paid call firefighter. I think they had 30 spots. I think I had to wait about 6 months before I got a spot as one of those, before somebody vacated one of those spots. And I was hired. Today, I don't know that we have 30 in the whole North Desert. That's how far down. A lot of that, and people ask me all the time, what's the drop in volunteers or paid call? Well, one is the requirements that the state has put on to become a firefighter. Even a paid call firefighter, what they've said is, and I don't disagree with them, if you're going to climb on a roof or enter a burning building or get into some environment that is immediately, what we call immediately dangerous to life and health, what we call a safety position, you have to have a certain level of training. And we don't care if you're a volunteer or a paid call, and those requirements have gone up every year. And so we find now that people who put themselves through all those requirements usually test for a full-time job somewhere, and they get picked up somewhere else. I think there's a cultural difference in the volunteering of some time. I think we've seen a little bit of that, perhaps. And the other thing that we've seen is just the people that want to do it, they're working 2 or 3 jobs. So I used to be able to go to school and come home in Wrightwood, and then I'd wear a pager. Now that gal that's going to school and coming home, they're going to work at the market, and then after market, they're taking a nap and they're going to another job. And so I don't know all of the reasons, but I do know this. It's harder and harder to get paid call and volunteer firefighters, and that supplemented a lot of the costs that we had here. I'm sure here in Lucerne Valley, because we would work closely with Lucerne Valley from the CSA 56, CSA 29 areas. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's probably a bulk of the increased costs.
Well, part of it, my understanding is that the local fire captains around here, they hate paid call. They hate volunteers. I don't know if it affects their union, or I don't know what their reason is. But they don't want anything to do with them. So that's a big problem I see. That if a young guy or young gal wanted to be paid call, it's just about virtually impossible nowadays. I don't even know, do you even have a program anymore?
We do where we have people. And what we found is, and over the 7 years I've been here, especially when we went down to the budget and I start trying to trim the budget, we would on average dedicate $60,000 or $70,000 to a paid call program, which is to equip them, to put them through their training, to make sure we could pay them per hour. And what we found is we had, in many cases, 1 or 2 people per station. So then we're like, well, that doesn't, $60,000 to get 2 people who might respond, it wasn't money well spent in my mind. I don't know that I've run across any, and we do a lot of personnel issues, and I know we have some of the chief officers out here. I don't know that we get, I haven't heard people that don't like them, but I know a lot of them started as paid call firefighters. But I do know that the requirements associated with it. So we started pooling them into certain areas. So we'd say, hey, why don't we put a couple stations together? Well, that only lasted for a while, and then we were down to 1 or 2 there. And so again, in the North Desert total, if we had 30, and we still do have some, if we had 30, I'd be surprised. But a lot of them just, they either get hired as full-time firefighters because the requirements are so high, or they move out of the area, or they move on to something else.
Okay, then one more comment, and I'll turn it over to the rest of the board. South of Highway 18, as I'm sure you're aware, is a state responsibility area. And so now we just beat back $150 a year tax from the state government. If that ever comes back, that means, and if your program is successful, that means we'll be assessed for $300 on top of our taxes. Now, I don't know if you know the demographics of Lucerne Valley, but Lucerne Valley is a I think it's actually designated, I'm not sure the right terminology, but it's a economically depressed area. You know, we just don't have a lot of money in this town. A lot of retired folks, a lot of people on low income, and this is just a lot of money. Yeah. So you're talking another $300. So if we have to pay the state for protection, and we have to pay for the county, that doesn't seem to be, that's not a balance right there.
Yeah. Maybe just a couple comments. I don't think there's a question there. As far as my knowledge of the community, my first full-time captain's assignment was right here at Station, at that time, 111. And so I was stationed here for about 8 months. So I'm familiar with the area. I've run calls out here. I know the challenge it is, and quite frankly, I don't go to any community. There isn't a community in the county fire department that I can say has $157. There are people that are better off in this county than others, but I know anytime I ask anybody to pay extra money for the services we provide, I balance that as your fire chief coming to you today, knowing that it's not popular to say, hey, I need to get extra revenue and this is one of the ways to do it. I balance that with letting you know I don't have anything extra here in Lucerne Valley. I wish I could tell you today that there's a little bit of fluff, and we had 2 engines out of the station, or we had multiple stations out here. I consider the service we provide here out of Lucerne Valley, and we have for years, the service we have today, with 1 fire engine out of 1 fire station in a community responding to an area as large as this. And we do add an ambulance. That's an extra cost. We don't recover all that, but we feel, and have always felt, and the board obviously believes it because they contribute more money out of the general fund, they believe that we shouldn't have to wait. You shouldn't have to wait for a half hour or 40 minutes for an ambulance to come out of Victorville. So I balance the burden that I'm placing on you, and I see it as that, with the essential service and the needed service that I'm providing here. And I'm telling you that my ability to continue to provide it, not just here and not specifically here, but in any community throughout the county that we serve, is jeopardized by the fact that I'm just structurally, I'm not bringing in as much revenue as I'm spending to provide these services.
I did have one more thing too, is our family has 80 acres in at least, I think it's at least 2 parcels in Landfair Valley, which is about 30 miles out of Goffs, in the middle of the eastern Mojave. We'll probably never see a county fire engine there. You know, it's raw desert, it's in the middle of the Mojave Preserve. The feds would probably be the first to roll in if there was a fire in that area. So it's kind of hard for me to see where I'm getting a benefit from that property to have a, you know, I don't know if there's a station in Goffs, probably not. So that means they're rolling out of Needles, which to get in there is probably over an hour. I'm sure it's well over an hour. So I don't see a cost benefit on that at all for that property out there.
Yeah.
So that would be $300 on that property. So it's just hard for me to fathom that. Okay, any other board members? Betty, get a mic.
I'll try this one. Sorry.
Just gotta watch out. Or it's gonna cover your ears.
Here, give her this one. And we'll just pass it, we'll just go right in line down.
I have 2 questions, maybe, depending on the answer to the first question. In all the information that we received and what's online, that gray area that's shown on the map extends to the far borders of San Bernardino County. But you just showed a map here, that map, that doesn't. What is the difference, and how come this one is showing the entire county turning gray when this one isn't?
The difference is this is specifically the gray area shown here. I wanted to kind of blow up. When I get back to this map, it's just so large that you can't see the North Desert Service Zone or where Lucerne Valley fits within this 19,000 square miles. So this is the entire district. And by the way, my intent is to, and approved by the board, is to expand it to every parcel within the county fire district. So it won't skip any. If it's within the fire district, it will be affected by FP5. And then this map is the only reason I think you're saying this area in South Desert. That is actually going to be, that will actually also have FP5 put on it. But that we just, again, I wanted to show you the boundaries. So
The reason I ask is because it stops before it gets to Johnson Valley. It's white in Johnson Valley.
yeah, but so that Johnson Valley is actually part of the South Desert.
And we will be included in
Yes, ma'am.
FP5.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, then that's my second question, which I wouldn't have had to ask if you'd have left us out. At the very, your introductory paragraph, everywhere I read it, says you need this You need this increased revenue to maintain current fire protection and emergency services. Just in recent years, the fire protection and, I don't know about the emergency services, but certainly the fire departments, the fire stations have been closed. The fire station that the volunteers of Johnson Valley built and was leased for $1 a year by County Fire, that lease was relinquished last year. They no longer want to use that station. It was lately only being used for emergency responder and for CERT training. We can't get homeowners insurance with fire protection because we're too far away from any. And now I'm hearing, well, I have heard that the station that's on the highway, which is number 19, I believe, is closed. It was paid call firemen and it's not in use. And I'm hearing that other stations further to the east, maybe not being included in FP5, but nonetheless have been closed. I heard that last month that there's a station here that's just being used to store equipment in. So we're maintaining that level. We're not getting any more service for the $157 a year parcel.
I ask for more service every year. So and I can tell you this very frankly, my board believes we need more service, but it's always responded to by where are we going to get revenue for more service. And so I'm telling you, I can't promise you anything. I know that we will be bringing in, if you look up here at the revenue that we expect to receive just in the North Desert, we know that we're going to be bringing in about $11.2 million. The problem is if I take what the county gives me in an MOU, which they may or may not provide for, and again, I'll ask for it, and then the amount of money I'm taking out of my reserves, which is $2.6 million, it gives me about $1.3 million to the positive here in the North Desert. I can't promise any services, any improvement services. I ask for an improvement of services every year, and I can tell you that people believe we need more services. I just don't have a way to fund them. I will tell you that this does provide a funding mechanism for me to at least open the door. Normally I knock and I don't even get into the door when I'm talking to the CEO finance because I'm not bringing money with me. This does provide some revenue that I can come in, and I believe it helps me, as we said on the last point on the benefits, it allows me to enter in when I ask for a contract with the county and say I'm bringing some money with me. So, but I can't promise any more services.
You're going to have a very hard sell.
Yes, ma'am.
In the areas where we have an estimated 45-minute response time at the minimum, minimum, I don't know. The best we can hope for is 45 minutes, where we used to have one that was a quarter of a mile away. You're going to have a lot of resistance to anybody being in, and particularly since it's a parcel tax.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what size the parcel is, and it doesn't matter how wealthy the person is who owns the parcel. It's just bang, 1, 2, 3, 4. You pay if you have a parcel. And the fellow that's talking about having more than one parcel, if they happen to be side by side, you're lucky. But we own a 1 acre parcel in addition to the one we live on, that the total tax bill is less than this $157 is going to be. And there's a lot of people out there that are like that. Our total tax bills are way down because our property taxes our property values are very low and getting lower. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I don't know if this is a question or a comment. As you know, it is a census designation that Lucerne Valley and maybe Johnson Valley is a severely economically disadvantaged community. So we're the lowest of the low and economically. The desert is low, period, across the board. And yes, we need fire protection services, and yes, we really appreciate first responders. We all do. And that's sort of a hammer you all can hang over our heads because we do appreciate you so much. But when you look at what you just described, it's so complicated. My eyes roll back in my head. All your different forms of funding, all your different districts, all your different, and that's very complex. And last week at Levita, we heard our state assemblyman's rep tell us how the state has a $9 billion overage, what's the word? Surplus, thank you. And because they can't put it in the rainy day fund, because the rainy day fund is full, and by law, they can't overfill the rainy day fund, so they're going to create a new fund to hang on to the $9 billion rather than return it to the taxpayers. And then we hear that, and then we hear all this complexity that you described, preventing you from even benefiting from any of that. That's really hard to take. And that's what creates taxpayer resistance. We don't have it here to spare. We just don't, because they've already taken it. So somebody needs to be looking at restructuring the funding. And we remember when we first got here in '75, and there was a wonderful fire station there, we had our fire chief and we had the guys, and they were independently funded by the local community, and they took care of the park, and they did all those functions that now seem to have to be separated to CSA 29 that has to pay certain people, and the fire department has to pay certain people. And why can't there be restructuring where they get back together again and costs are shared and there's more efficiency?
Well, as a question, I can tell you we run as efficiently as we possibly. There isn't a year that we don't go through a budget process and we don't cut costs. That's the goal, for us to cut costs. But we know expenses are increasing for the services we already provide. I will tell you, for a department our size, we have 2 deputy chiefs. We have 6 assistant chiefs. I have colleagues in the valley that have 2 deputy chiefs and 3 assistant chiefs. Now I understand it's relative, right? They have a lot of money there. They might have 5 stations and we have 60 stations. But our whole goal as the fire district, and the whole reason that we brought everything together, and quite frankly, the only reason that other departments look to join us is, can we pool our resources, put them in one pot and spread costs? Can we get some economy of scale? And so to the extent that we don't do that with the CSAs anymore, when we became the fire district and we went away from those 43 separate board governed districts to one fire district, to the extent we lost some economy of scale there, I can assure you we got another economy of scale when we joined with everybody and pooled it with the one fire district. We're not restricted. I don't have to hire a fire chief for each one of those CSAs anymore. I don't have to charge them or rely on them to pay for all of the EMS costs that they generate within. I take money from other areas. If it's generated somewhere else, but there's a benefit to the area that we're providing service in, or they receive a benefit from it, that's where we can. That's where we get some benefit. But I hear you. I know when I was working for CSA 56, it was very similar. We were the same employer, and so we would just get those duties as assigned as the same employer. Yes, ma'am.
Years ago, when I first came to Lucerne Valley and came to the MAC meetings, and sort of building on what Linda and Roger have said, those were the days that our budgets were balanced, that we had a surplus, but we also had all of the service. It was how much you got was a percentage of the CSA 29 budget, not CSA 29, you guys came and you made a presentation and it was voted upon. The recommendation didn't go from you guys. The recommendation came from the board to the Board of Supervisors. And we had everything back then. And I think that's what Linda was commenting on. Why can we not go back to that system? At least Lucerne Valley didn't benefit in any way from you joining the large group together. We lost. And I don't know how better to say that, but we did. You're asking for money, the county's asking for money, and this is on top of the taxes that are paid already. And something for you all. Harriet is my mother. Most of you know me by Marie.
If I could just comment, I will tell you this, and I know this to be true because I have history here in the desert and in this community. You do benefit. You get resources here that you didn't have, that you had to pick up the phone and ask for before. And I know that even between CSAs, we were the same board governed, we had the same board. And yet in Wrightwood, I worked on the ambulance in Pinion Hills. It was Wrightwood, Pinion Hills, CSA 56 and 56F1. I never came out here to Lucerne Valley. I remember coming out here on an ambulance out of Pinion Hills one time, and that was for a friend, Chris Rutledge's funeral, who died, as you know, over here providing service to the community. Today it's routine that when the ambulance is out and it's out for a long period of time, or the fire engine's out, the area chief, which is Ron Walls here, his battalion chief who's on duty will move resources out here because they know it's a cul-de-sac. They know it's a long ways away. And so where you might have had to go by and cross your fingers and hope that nothing happened before, we do have a depth of resources. I say a breadth of programs and a depth of resources that communities that relied on just what they had before and hoped that they could call somebody next door and get it, you have access to that now. So I do know that to be, you might not see it. It might not be as evident because it's not run by the CSA, but I do believe that you get better service. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be your fire chief. I believe in the model that we offer. I believe that the best way to spend your money, the taxpayers' money, is that we pool it all and figure out what we have to provide. I believe if we could cut a station over here, if I could do it for less than 3 people on a fire engine, which basically means that when the ambulance is out, they could actually go and fight a fire, or we could do it for somehow less than the ambulance. We actually, since the time we've been here, we actually removed the safety personnel. They're the most expensive employees, the firefighters, and we replaced the ambulance folks with single function folks. So they're paramedics and EMTs, very similar to the private ambulance. We use that model. They're general employees. So I can tell you we're doing everything we can. I do believe there's a benefit. I get the fact that you're paying more money for the same service you're getting now. I think that has to be, and we hear that throughout the communities we've talked to. Why can't I continue to receive the same services I have now, but you're going to charge me extra for it? And I know that's a hard sell, and I say a sell, I'm not selling anything, but I know that's a hard proposition.
One other thing occurred to me just now when you were talking. In those days, and even today, I can pay $65 a year, and we're covered for ambulance service. Back then, we could do it too. So I'm finding it very hard to buy what you're selling.
I understand.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and collect your cards and we can turn it over to the, you got them? Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is the chief will start answering some of the cards and we will keep collecting them. Also, I know there are many of you that prefer to just get your question answered and perhaps leave, or maybe you just want one-on-one. So they're all of us in uniform, any of them. If you prefer just to step outside and have your question answered, we most certainly be happy to do that. We will leave time at the end as well to answer everyone's questions as well.
I just have an idea for the chief. Billy Mitchell, we've had the Rattlesnake Canyon allotment for 20-some years. And you guys have taken, since the 1900s, all the cattle, instead of doing preventive to keep this flash fuel down, the Forest Service has taken cattle out of the leases, the BLM has taken cattle out. Why don't you guys put a study together and see how you can utilize them plus gaining revenue off of the AUM. You got 3 entities, and I'll tell you right now, 2 major fires went up to Rattlesnake Canyon Ranch, and thank the Lord, it stopped at the boundary, and those cattle have been there since 1900. So there's a tool that you can use that nobody wants to look at anymore, and it's the first one Swarthoff did. Swarthoff Canyon burnt this year, 1900. He was the first Forest Service ranger. There was no major fire. And now everything's burning up because you've got all this fire fuel and you're not utilizing it. So if you work for the Forest Service, the BLM, and sit down and start doing some preventive instead of trying to fight it after it starts, you might be able to generate revenue and knock your costs down. Just an idea from an old cowboy.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if I could get you to, I want to connect you with the area chief, Ron, and we can talk about that. So he actually covers the Wrightwood area, and he also covers this area. So to the extent that we can work with any of our partners, well, obviously the Forest Service is a federal agency.
Exactly.
That's CAL FIRE is a state agency, but we all kind of help each other when we can, but we all have different responsibilities. So the fire district is responsible for people, property, and improvements. To the extent that we can use any of the programs that you're talking about to raise revenue, we try to turn over every rock we can.
Everybody's been blinded by that. Nobody thinks about it no more. It's like a thing of the past. But that was a major thing that kept the San Luis Mountains from burning up.
Yeah.
You know, and there's revenue. I think you can create. Like, you're going to have to work with all 3 entities. But I mean, when you get a forest fire, you all work together anyway when everything's burning up.
Yes, sir.
So why not work together and prevent? It's my theory.
Yeah, I like your ideas. If we can get, if I can get some more details, get more details to Ron, that would be great. Yeah, thank you, sir.
So that's actually that was actually
Okay.
his question. so.
Okay. You said when you started 7 years ago, you had a $20 million surplus, then you raised an additional $23 million. How did you raise an additional $23 million in taxes? So the only thing that we've done since I've been here to generate revenue is we've increased the contribution from the county. So the county is essentially increased the contract that they have with us. And so our costs are pretty well fixed. And I say our costs are fixed. We work with county finance to generate a budget. Our budget is presented, and the cost of a firefighter is set. We know that what it is every year, and then essentially the county picks up the difference in the areas that don't generate enough revenue. Was that the question, or did I miss it? This one says, what will happen to the Yucca Mesa station? So at this point, we're looking at a couple different things. We're looking at how we position the stations we have right now. The community of Yucca Valley specifically, and we had a community meeting in Yucca Valley, both there and Wonder Valley, is we had a community meeting there, and as we've talked about it, the Yucca Mesa station was well positioned when it was the Yucca Valley Fire District, and you had the boundaries of the fire district. What we found is now, if we look at the call volume, the Yucca Mesa station actually, and it runs a lot of calls into Landers, Flamingo Heights, and out 247. The station right downtown actually gets to the Aberdeen and 247 at the same time that the Yucca Mesa station gets there. Sometimes one beats the other, and the other time depends on how fast they get out the door. My point on that is, if most of their calls are run in Landers or Flamingo Heights, and most of the Yucca Mesa stations are, either that or they're run downtown in Yucca Valley, is the best station placement for that station on Yucca Mesa. So that's something we're looking at right now. We have no immediate plans to move that station, obviously, but we are looking at ways that we can position those stations. I told you that we have a software program that shows the call volumes and response times and where they're best positioned. The Yucca Mesa station is at kind of its end of life. We're going to have to invest a lot of money in it to rebuild it, or to add on to it, remodel it, or we're going to have to figure out a better place for it. That's also the same for the downtown Yucca Valley station. That's the same thing for this station here, quite frankly. We're adding some rooms to it, but at the end of the day, we'll have to come up with a way to replace this. I think it's a 50-year station, and it's all going on all of 50 years now. How can we change the distance to more than 14 miles to the fire station in order to be able to acquire homeowners insurance. We are in a catch-22 situation. Too far in either direction to have homeowners insurance. Yeah, I understand, and that's at 19,000 square miles, we see that throughout the county. We see the closest fire station, in some cases, it's an hour and a half away, and so we are investing in some resources. Obviously, our partnership with the sheriff. We have a partnership now with an air ambulance company called Reach that is no additional cost to the county, but it provides some of those services for people that need them. One of our concerns with our partnership with a private air ambulance company is that they're very expensive. So if it's $2,000 a ground transport, it can be as much as $20,000 for an air transport. So I understand when it's a life-saving situation, you're not asking how much it costs, but at the end of the day, they're both very expensive. The MAC committee member, she mentioned a $65. The subscription program is offered by the fire district, and so we offer that program for people that are on a fixed income to say, if you need it, even though it could be a $2,000 bill, if you pay that $65, then we'll cover the cost. We'll still bill your medical insurance company, Medicare, Medi-Cal, private insurance, but whatever we get will be all you pay. And so that is a program offered by the fire district, and before that, CSA 29, we had one over in CSA 56 as well. But it is a way, and we get a lot of people on fixed incomes who say, I don't know if I'm going to use it, and I don't know how many times I'm going to use it, but if I do, I want to make sure I have my subscription in, and that's a subscription program you can get over here at your local fire station. In private business, we cut our salaries to meet the budget. Do you? Are any of these funds you're asking for going to help fund your pension fund? Well, the short answer on the pension fund is yes. The money that we spend goes to salaries and benefits. And the other thing is, and let me just tell you this, your county firefighters are in the bottom third in salary and benefits in the county of San Bernardino. And I understand it's relative. We don't serve as wealthy an area as some of the valley areas. But I will tell you, and I only know this because HR, our Human Resources Department for the county, is currently negotiating with the firefighters. We are not the highest paid. I run the largest fire organization in the county, but I'm not the highest paid. I'm plenty well paid. But the firefighters, we do everything we can. We know we're not going to be the highest paid. The people that come out here and work and in some cases live in Lucerne Valley, they do that because they like the county. I went and worked another place and came back to the county, not because I was going to get more wealthy here, but because my heart is in the county. You have a lot of people that work here, not because they're getting paid the most, but because they have a heart to serve the county. And I would only tell you that I believe that the pay and benefits that our firefighters get are fair. And they're not the highest. In fact, we know that they're in the bottom third compared to the fire agencies throughout the county of San Bernardino. But a portion of the money that I spend in my budget is spent on salary and benefits do include pension costs. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Will you please serve our basic fire needs with the $500,000 you receive from our property taxes? What happened to the $44 million surplus? The surplus we've used to fund the organization over the last 4 years. That's where that went, and we might be forced to live off of that. If I don't get extra revenue, the community of Lucerne Valley, specifically Lucerne Valley, is expected to raise a little bit over $1.5 million in FP5 revenue throughout the entire, moving all the way out 247, Old Women's Springs, out towards Slash X Ranch, and then this way over towards, I think it's a Mill Pass or Pioneer, the fire district. So we believe that will generate enough revenue that we wouldn't have to worry about a community like this providing the amount of revenue that we need. But if we had to go back to the $500,000, like I started the presentation, that is an option. In fact, there's other options to raise revenue. People have asked me that. Mark, how come you're doing this? Couldn't you put it to a vote of the people? Or couldn't you do a sales tax? Or couldn't you do a utility users tax? The simple answer to that is yes. I could have done all of that. I could have recommended all of that. And yet what I recommended was what is available to us through fire district law to maintain or improve services. In my mind, it's to maintain services. We can go through a public hearing process, and we can Obviously, with a public hearing and notice to the homeowners or landowners, we can assess that property. But I understand your point. How are certifying that all property owners, including potentially nationwide absentee owners, are sufficiently notified of your proposed action? That we just simply use the assessor's addresses. So wherever you get your tax, your property tax bill is where this will go. We're working to make sure that we get everybody notified on title, and we make sure that we don't know that they're all accurate, but we do know that it's going to, if it's wherever you get your property tax bill. That's the current address that we'll send it to. How is it that you charge to use you chose to use the socialist argument of fair share in your recent email survey? That's a separate question. I don't know how to answer that other than I have a varying number of fire protection and paramedic service zones. I have a varying number of property tax rate throughout the county, and it's even harder, quite frankly, it's been harder for me to go to communities and ask for $157 more, and I don't even provide a station in their community, like Johnson Valley. Here we have a station in the community. We're fortunate, we've had it here for a long time, and in fact this community serves Johnson Valley in many cases, depending on where they are, which side of Johnson Valley they're on. So I will tell you that I am trying to distribute that cost more fairly, and in some cases you could argue that it's more fair here than it is in places that don't have a fire station. Number 3 is how many fire department personnel present here tonight will be paying this additional tax? Well, anybody that lives in the county fire district, so anybody that, yeah.
Already paid.
Well, you might be, some of people might be in an FP5. I actually live down the hill in a fire district down the hill, and I pay $268 a year. It's called a community facilities district, but it's just fire only, and that's on top of my property taxes. Now, I chose to live there, so I'm not making that comparison, and nobody came to me and put it on top of my property after I lived there. But what we did notice as we looked around is a lot of the departments that aren't struggling financially are departments that live on something additional to their property taxes. We have noticed that. And the ones that live only on their property taxes typically are very, very high valued properties in the county of San Bernardino and in fact throughout the state. The response times in Johnson Valley is at best 45 minutes, and I would agree with that. How will this tax help improve the response times, or will it? It won't improve the response times. The best thing I can tell you about this $157 is it will allow me to maintain the services that I give you a 45-minute response time on. And so I wish I could tell you I'd drop it down to 30 minutes or 15 minutes. The very simple fact is I can't promise you that. I can't tell you that. It won't happen. But what I can tell you is that if I don't get extra revenue, the stations that I even have today are at risk. And 45 minutes is a long time. It's probably one of our longest response times for any community in the county. But we have small communities throughout the county, and we have long response times throughout the county. Our commitment is to make sure we start something, and if it's an emergency that we need to get something there faster, we'll start a helicopter to get there. That's our commitment to you. We triage all the medical emergencies that come in, and if it reaches a certain level, we actually launch a helicopter out of Victorville, and we get there. Our response times are much faster that way, and we have a flight nurse and a flight paramedic along with a pilot that's capable of transporting patients to trauma centers as well as stroke and what we call STEMI or heart attack centers as well. Are you CAL FIRE? No, we're not CAL FIRE. So I'm going to give you a 30-second description of what we are. We're the county. The county is responsible, the fire district is responsible for people, property, and structures, or essentially improvements. The state fire department is responsible for watershed and timber. That's their mission online. And then the green fire engines of the Forest Service, and you might get all three of them at any point here because we're so close to all three areas, is the Forest Service, and they're responsible for natural resources. So my primary responsibility in collecting your tax dollars is to provide service to you, people, protect people, provide medical care and fire rescue and EMS to you. and also property, protect your property and your improvements. Now, fortunately, we share a wall with CAL FIRE, and they're often there. I think that depends on what the fire season's like throughout the state, and we help each other. So we do augment each other, and if they have a fire on timber or watershed, we help them as well, as long as we're available. We know that it can impact you as well. What is the government code? It's 13800. If you type in any search on the computer, if you type in fire district law or California fire district law, it's health and safety code 13800, 13800, and it's a whole section called fire district law. Why is Red Mountain so high? They chose to assess themselves $192. So that was they actually voted 2/3 vote in the community of Red Mountain. We use that money, by the way, we pass that money through to Kern County. Kern County has a station right there across the border. It's not called Red Mountain on the Kern County side, it's Johannesburg. Yeah, and they have a fire station in proximity to that community. We pay them those property taxes, and they provide fire rescue and EMS to the community of Red Mountain, but that was their choice. What happened to the fire presentation or the fire prevention fee money? That doesn't go to us. That goes to the state. So we never got any portion of the fire prevention money. That was for what they call prevention purposes. I will tell you candidly and frankly that there were a lot of communities throughout the state that didn't see any tangible benefit to the prevention efforts. And I think they had a hard time. They were collecting a lot of money, and they had a hard time getting out and providing those prevention efforts statewide. But that was a state tax that went to the state fire department. 3% increase every year. Why is it not just charged $1,000? Well, it's up to a 3% increase. The way FP5 is written is there's no sunset on it, and it's up to 3% every year. We haven't gotten 3% every year, and we use a lot of different factors to figure out if we're going to ask for 3% every year. We use CPI, the Consumer Price Index, cost of living. We also look at how our budget is for that given service zone. We're required in FP5 to spend that money collected in the service zone that it's collected in. That's a LAFCO requirement pursuant to our formation at the LAFCO 3000 formation of the fire district. You said you're hiring an independent company to manage protest letters. How will I know for sure what percentages of owners sent letters for purposes of triggering an election or terminating the expansion? Simply because they'll report it. It won't be us that reports it, it's going to be them that report it. They're going to collect the mail, the protests, and they're going to tabulate them. In fact, I think it's actually a separate company that's tabulating the results. So we're trying to make it as transparent, get as many people that can come in and report those results as we possibly can.
How are they going to report it?
It will be at the public hearing. So the public hearing on the 16th, let me just get the timeline back up again real fast. 16th of October. So we're doing, the notices will go out on September 14th. You should see them shortly after that. It'll talk about the protest process. It'll give you the required information that's required in state law. It'll describe the protest process. We're going to do community meetings in August and September, and then October 16th is a public hearing, and that's when the protest results will be presented to my fire board, and then, of course, a possible adoption of the resolution to expand FP5.
The same meeting that it is reported, that you can adopt the resolution.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, depending on what the protest results are. It's that we.
Before that, like if you want to get something going, like to get more people, or.
Well, the protest process it's actually ending on the 16th of October, so we're trying to get as much time as we possibly can for the protest. So it'll go all the way up to the 16th. By the way, somebody had asked as well, do you have to go down there for the 16th? We talked with the clerk of the board, and they will open up both the High Desert Government Center and the Joshua Tree Center. So just like they do board meetings, if you want to come and show up and make your comments at one of those two locations, in addition to obviously the Valley Center where the board chambers are.
So we have just a few more questions on the card, so we'll take these, and then we will close the meeting and take individual questions with whomever you wish.
How much does it cost to have services in Lucerne Valley and Johnson Valley? So it's, what we do is we can break it down by fire station. So in the community of Lucerne Valley, again, it's about $2.2 million. You say about, why is it about? You can go online and get our budget. We have an annual report that rolls everything up, but if you want more detail, our annual budget is actually included online, sbcfire.org as well. You can see more specific costs. But when I say it, about $2.2 million, it really depends on what area of the pay scale that the firefighters are working on the condition of the station, how cost efficient it is, how many people we have assigned there. If we have 5 people like we do here, it costs more to operate the station than it does if we have 3 people at it. So $2.2 million, and then it's about $1 million for an ambulance. It's a little bit less than $1 million. We round it to $1 million. I think it's $960 some odd thousand dollars. And then we have to subtract the amount of money we collect. So we do bill your medical insurance companies. We bill Medicare, Medi-Cal, and commercial insurance companies. So our net cost is about $600,000 for an ambulance in the communities that we serve. We don't make enough money. And this is very typical. The valley areas run enough calls. They might run 5 calls in an hour, where in Lucerne Valley we might run 5 ambulance transports in a week. So the cost to provide the service is the same, minus the fuel, but we just don't get very much reimbursement. So what we do is we take a loss in everywhere we provide ambulance service, because we just don't have a high enough call volume. So we actually lose about $400,000. We make up about $400,000. We lose about $600,000 in that. And so the total cost to provide service is about $2.8 million. With FP5 here in Lucerne Valley, if we take a look at Lucerne Valley, we should generate close to $2.8 million. We should be right about $2.5 to $2.8 million, all depending on how the revenue comes in from FP5. Johnson Valley, right now we don't have any service in Johnson Valley, so it doesn't cost anything for that service. As you know, we don't even have a paid call program there anymore, our volunteer program. My property taxes went up $700 this year. Why can't you use some of that money? That already stretched my budget, so there is none left for this new fee. And I understand that. We just don't have access to that. As a fire district, I don't have any access to that money. Other than the contract I have with the County of San Bernardino, and they do give me money out of the general fund, I don't have access to that money. Why is there only 4 weeks between mailing notices and to the expansion to property owners and possible adoption of the resolutions? There are many properties that are second homes or on vacation that may not even receive notices. What is the, as far as that goes, we're trying to get the word out as much as we can. When we proposed the resolution, we felt like having a couple months to go out into the community and talk about it. That's not required by state law, but we felt like that was important. We were getting to our MACs, our community meetings. Some of them aren't MACs, they're associations. We're getting out to homeowners associations. We're doing everything we can to get the word out, and then we're making sure, as hard as it might be to understand everything we're talking about tonight, that you have a website. It's not going to be, well, what did I write down and what do I remember? We're trying to give you as much access as we can to as much information as you can. So if you can, and not everybody has access to the internet, I get that, but if you can get access to a friend or at the library to the internet, you can print up all the information. I know that if you want more than this, you can talk to Ron, or I think we have his BC, Bill back here. He's one of the 24-hour battalion chiefs that covers the entire area. You can ask him, and we can print up as much information. So this effort really is about getting you as much information as we possibly can. I know you might not agree with it, but it is about getting it out as much information as we possibly can. Second homes or on vacation receive notices. We'll send those to your post office that you receive, your post office box, or your street that you receive your property tax. What is the minimum requirement for informing the public of these proposals? The minimum requirement is a public hearing and notice to the property owner. That's the minimum requirement. You'll find that in state law, 13800. And I don't know that they say how on the notice, so we're going to send it to you the same way you receive your property tax bill. I just heard of this 3 hours ago. I have 6 parcels and can't believe it. I understand. What guarantee do we have that even after you get a third tax, Lucerne Valley Station doesn't close if you're over budget later? I can't give any guarantees, right? I mean, we don't know, there's not a guarantee of tomorrow. I can tell you this, with this money, with one FP5 here, I'm able to keep that. There is no discussion about what the future is for the Lucerne Valley Station. I can tell you this: the County of San Bernardino and the board that serves as the fire board has believed in this station since the time that we taken it over as the county fire district, but they were board governed when they were CSA 29. It was a board governed fire district, which meant that the MAC was making recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, and they have funded this as much as we have fallen short here to provide the full funding for this station. This board, the fire board, has always believed that, and has put their money where their mouth is on keeping this station open, to include an ambulance for as long as I can remember, and a fire engine. That staffing on that has changed a little bit with volunteers and professionals, but at this point, when somebody takes a vacation day, and they all negotiate a couple weeks of vacation a year, most employers do that, we make sure that there's somebody here. We don't close the station. If the ambulance is gone or out of service, we put another ambulance here so that the crew can run in that ambulance. So we're going to make sure that you have service out here. That I can guarantee you for as long as I'm chief, as long as we have the revenue. And that's really why I'm coming to you here today. I wouldn't come to you here and myself or bring my team out here if I didn't feel like this was important and necessary. This isn't a fishing expedition for me, but I wouldn't do the other opposite. I wouldn't make cuts next year or come to you 3 months before my budget is due and then cry wolf. I have my board knowing that we have a problem next year, and I know that this budget year, and I'm coming to you and telling you that, and I am telling you that if we don't do something, I'm going to be faced with sitting down and trying to figure out what I do next. And I'm not coming here to scare you, and I'm not coming here to tell you that your station's going away. I'm just telling you I have to make some difficult decisions unless I get revenue. One of the options that the board had was to give me more money, and their point was simply this: Mark, I don't know if I'm going to have the money next year. It's not that I don't want to, I just don't know I'm going to have it next year. And so we go through that budget process every single year. And so with this revenue, I will be able to come here and say, we don't need to worry about the service here. And I understand it doesn't do a lot for Johnson Valley, but it doesn't increase from 45 minutes, as crazy as that sounds. It doesn't increase anywhere. And I know I can improve services, and there's areas throughout the county that I'd love to improve services. I'll never improve services without more revenue. And I know I get revenue on your backs. It doesn't come free, and it's not on trees. I know that as well. And that's why I'm here telling you today. I understand that I'm asking a lot. I'm telling you that what we've chosen to do is a big lift for you. And I know that. I've heard that from every community, from Wonder Valley to Havasu Landing to Grand Terrace. But I'm coming to you tonight with that message personally. Yes, sir.
Just in general, throughout the Midwest, there are pure volunteer fire departments. They're funded by the training, and the equipment is partially funded, for the most part, funded by the state. They're pure volunteer fire departments. It's not a paid call. I think that sort of thing, what is preventing that sort of thing from happening throughout the state? Is a state regulation. So if you have people that can be trained to handle initial response, that would give you time to arrive, but not something is being done in the meantime. And if it's just the state foolishness, keeping people from being able to protect their own communities, purely out of that concern for their own communities. I was on a volunteer fire department for 3 years. Nobody ever paid us for anything like that. You know, our pay was saving the Amish guys' barn down the road. You know, yeah. It didn't make any difference who it was. The payment was that we take care of our neighbors.
I think, when I can only tell you what I can't put my finger on it other than knowing that the availability of people that are willing and able, and then the requirements of the state. You know, the fire service through the state fire marshal's office saw something very similar to the way Post on the law enforcement saw it. It used to be that you could be a reserve police officer with like a weekend class, what they call PC 832, I think it was called, and you could be a police officer. But they said, hey, that's not enough training to keep people safe and to keep the community safe. So they increased the requirements. We saw almost the exact same thing on the fire side. It was an increase. When I started as a PCF, it was basically a strong back and a willingness to carry a pager and listen off duty. And then it was, well, you got to go to a fire academy. And then it was, you got to get this set of classes. And it's not just this set of classes, and you got to maintain this set of classes. And so we have seen, and I can't argue with it, because if I'm going to put somebody in a burning building, I want to make sure that they go home as well, so that they have a minimum level of training. But we've seen that level of training increase at the state level year after year. And so that is one of them. I do think the availability of people in community, I don't think there's 30 strong backs at the community that I was started in, and yet it was a waiting list to get on before. You literally couldn't get on. But so I think requirements, but we do know there's a lot of states have volunteer fire departments. Here we've seen a reduction, and I'm active in the State Fire Chiefs Association, and I will tell you that we're seeing a pretty dramatic reduction in volunteers or paid call, whatever you call them, throughout the state. It isn't just here in San Bernardino County.
Sounds like it might be cultural.
Cultural as well, yes, sir.
So with that,
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I just had a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate all the fire departments and the work you do. You guys are amazing, okay? In here you have nothing but senior citizens basically sitting here, okay? Limited incomes, anybody in here won the big lottery? I don't think so. But what makes anybody in here think that we are naive enough to think once the county gets their hands on that money, that you're gonna see a nickel of it? Because, oh yeah, just like Sacramento does, they scam us. If we had half the money they pay when they shoot their movies out here, put into this area, we wouldn't have an issue with our fire department right now. And those are facts.
Yeah.
So what guarantee do we have that we're gonna see anything? Because you're asking me to take out a loan to pay the payment that I already paid. My taxes would go up double.
Yeah, I can only tell you this. You should hold me accountable to make sure that the money I take. But I will tell you this: the money,
Not the money you take, the money that is totally being taken from us to that.
No, I understand. I'm the county fire district, and so I can tell you this: none of it goes to the county. I'm a separate legal entity, and fortunately, I can tell you the only business I'm in is fire rescue and EMS. So I know it's not going to go to Rose, and it's not going to go to a social. As much as we need social programs, it's going to go to. It's going to go to the fire district.
100% of that money is going to go strictly into this pump right here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And in fact, the money that's generated in this service zone is going to stay in this service zone. And if you go back and look at how much money we expect to raise here in the service zone, it's $11.2 million that's raised in this service zone in the North Desert, and it's a big area, is going to stay here in the North Desert. We know in Lucerne Valley it's going to generate, I told you, over 2 million, about 1.5, 1.8 million. We're going to generate almost as much money as it's going to cost to run this station with the ambulance and the fire engine. And so that's, but it's going to me. I will tell you that. Nobody else, by law, as a separate legal entity, it can't go anywhere else.
So that's put into a separate bank account, separate fund.
For the fire district.
Is that verifiable?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I'd like to
Yes.
see that on
Yes,
the
sir.
website.
Yeah. Well, you can't. I don't think you can show the bank account. Although we do have our finance manager here, so if there's a bank account to be shown, she can show it to you. But it's a budget. It's a separate budget from the county. So the county has a lot of different departments and budgets online. Ours is separate. Ours is a separate budget.
Okay, but it still passes through their coffers, correct?
No, actually it doesn't. It's property taxes that go straight to the district. So your property taxes go straight, your property tax share that I told you about, that Advil at 12%, goes straight to the fire district. This assessment will go straight to the fire district.
100% of it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, absolutely.
I am doubtful, sir. Not that you,
Yeah.
I'm not disparaging
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I just don't trust God.
I understand your skepticism, but yeah.
Okay, let's move on here. Does that, pretty much
I'm
wrapped
done.
up?
Thank you,
Okay.
sir. I appreciate that.
I want to thank you so much for coming, and they're going to be around here. We're going to wrap the meeting up here in about 5 minutes, so the fire personnel will be here, for you can talk to them one-on-one. So, thank you very much. Okay, we have no reports this month, no action, non-action items, no action items. Any council members request or reports? Okay, next meeting will be September 20th, 5 o'clock here at the community center. It looks like we are going to have the, and I can't remember his title, I'm sorry, but it's like somebody big in the trash business with the county. And so we can try to drill down on the illegal dumping and all that. So, and the problems we've been having at the landfill out here. So that'll be next month. I'm sorry I don't have that information off the top of my head. So with that, we are adjourned at, what is that, 6:40.